Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with tensions in the Middle East after a weekend exchange of fire between Israel and Hezbollah. More than 100 Israeli warplanes hit missile launchers in southern Lebanon Sunday morning. Hezbollah responded with a rocket and drone attack that killed one Israeli soldier with fallen debris. Israeli officials claim the strike prevented a massive assault planned by the Iran-backed militant group. Israel has declared a 48-hour state of emergency. Now there is relative calm, as we hear from Paul Wallace, who leads Bloomberg's coverage of the economy and government in the Middle East.
If Hezbollah had managed to cause a lot of damage in Israel or if it had killed many people, especially civilians, then I think we would be facing a very different situation today. And Israel might well have been preparing for or even have started an all-out war with Hezbollah. Tensions are still extremely high, though, and I think no one's under any illusions that we're sort of out of the woods just yet.
Bloomberg's Paul Wallace says the strike comes as the region awaits a response to Israel's killing of a top Hezbollah commander in a Beirut suburb last month. The Middle East is also bracing for a reaction from Iran to the killing of a Hamas leader in Tehran last month.
Meanwhile, Nathan, the U.S. closely monitoring developments in the Middle East. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is appealing for calm.
It is incumbent on all parties in the region to work towards de-escalation and stability. And so we are feverishly working in Cairo as we speak with our team and the teams of the other mediators, as well as with the Israelis, to get to a ceasefire and hostage deal.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Following the exchange of fire, planned ceasefire negotiations still took place in Cairo. A Hamas delegation left the talks with a spokesperson saying Israel is setting new conditions for a truce. Israeli officials say there was progress. The Associated Press is reporting that negotiations will continue at lower levels in the coming days.
And Karen, oil advanced following the weekend strike. Global benchmark crude rose toward $80 a barrel, and West Texas Intermediates climbed past $75. Oil now sits marginally higher on the year, aided by the geopolitical risks and a likely U.S. interest rate cut next month.
And speaking of those potential rate cuts, Nathan, bond traders are focusing in on bets over the size of that first reduction and the future path of easing after Fed Chair Jay Powell's comments in Jackson Hole on Friday.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Following Jay Powell's speech, Bloomberg contributor and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers said the Fed chair is on the right path.
Inflation is coming down. The economy is slowing. On current facts, absolutely, the next move should be towards monetary policy easing.
Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers added that Jay Powell gave no indication on the size or path of easing.
And Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker says the path to rate cuts will be a critical component of monetary easing.
One thing I heard is 25, 50, that doesn't matter so much as commit to a process. What I've heard, particularly from the bankers, is they need time to absorb the changes. So don't just stop and start.
Philadelphia Fed Chief Patrick Harker spoke with Bloomberg's Michael McKee, along with Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee. He's raising concerns about the labor market.
This reflects the reality of the economy that we've got to keep our eye on the employment side of the mandate now. This is what the path down to 2% inflation looks like. You know, you got some bumps, but I think that side's looking a lot better.
The Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee adds inflation is cooling to the Fed's 2% target.
Well, Nathan, Jay Powell did say progress on inflation, along with the health of the labor market, will guide the policy path. Fed officials will get a sense of that progress at the end of the week when the central bank's preferred gauge of inflation, the core PCE price index, is released on Friday. Bloomberg Economics says July's monthly PCE inflation data should be consistent with the 2% target for a fourth straight month.
And ahead of that data, Karen, the other market-moving event could come in the middle of the week when we get earnings from NVIDIA. Bloomberg Bloomberg executive editor Paul Dobson says he expects the AI chip giant to beat its lofty expectations for another quarter.
I don't even know if you can call the expectations lofty anymore. You know, we know that the AI story is great, that momentum continues, and that is going to inform at least that big block within the S&P and US stocks and global stocks as well that is AI waiting now. And people will be paying quite a lot of attention to it to see how long that theme and that narrative can continue.
Bloomberg's Paul Dobson says investors will be paying attention to those results from NVIDIA. They come after the close on Wednesday.
Well, elsewhere in company news, Nathan, Boeing has suffered a new setback in its space ambitions. And Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports the company was snubbed for the return mission of NASA astronauts.
NASA says the continued struggles are causing it to finally decide to not have the Starliner bring them back, but instead wait until February and come back by SpaceX. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson says safety.
The decision to keep Butch and Sonny aboard the International Space Station and bring the Boeing Starliner home uncrewed is a result of a commitment to safety.
This leaves Boeing's new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, with a question of how committed Boeing will remain, knowing the costs that might be ahead. It has not been a good year for Boeing. Ed, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Ed, thank you. Meantime, in Europe, not exactly a good time for Telegram. The messaging app is questioning why its CEO, Pavel Durov, was taken into custody at an airport near Paris over the weekend. Agence France-Presse says Durov is being held on suspicion of failing to prevent criminal use of the app. Bloomberg's Annabelle Druller says many countries are concerned about Telegram.
Telegram as a messaging app has been often linked to extremist activity online. It's seen as being quite light touch on content moderation as well. And that's a way that misinformation, for instance, can kind of spread like wildfire on it. And so authorities are becoming much more aware of this now. And we saw the UK, for instance, talking about it and its role and its prominence in those anti-immigrant riots.
Bloomberg's Annabelle Drullers reports Telegram says it abides by European laws and is awaiting a prompt resolution of the situation.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are set to return to the campaign trail this week. Harris and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, are kicking off a bus tour in Georgia, hoping to build on their momentum following the Democratic National Convention. Former President Trump plans to head to Michigan. It's going to be his third time in the battleground state in just the last 9 days. Meanwhile, Republican and Democratic lawmakers are pushing their candidates. Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas.
You would have thought watching the Democratic convention last week that the Democrats are not in office, that they're not in power, that they're campaigning against an incumbent Republican, when in reality, she's been part of the failures of the Biden-Harris administration for 4 years.
Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont.
People are growing tired and fatigued with Trump's consistent and outrageous lies. And I think no matter what people may think of Kamala Harris, I think they want stability in the White House.
Both senators spoke on ABC's This Week, heard Sundays on Bloomberg. 5 people were killed in what police in Nassau County believe was a murder-suicide. They were found Sunday in a home in Syosset. Nassau County police say one male victim was dead of an apparent gunshot wound just outside the house on the front lawn. The other 4 victims were found inside. Police say it happened at the home of a 95-year-old Long Island woman who died about a week ago. Prosecutors say the suspect in Friday's attack in Germany was motivated by Islamic State group ideology. A 26-year-old Syrian man has been ordered held on suspicion of murder in the Salaga knife attack. It left 3 dead and 8 wounded at a festival marking the city's 650th anniversary. Towns across the country are on alert as mosquito-borne illnesses are on the rise, including the dangerous Eastern equine encephalitis virus. Plymouth, Massachusetts is closing parks and fields from dusk to dawn. Dr. John Brownstein says an infection can be deadly, but it is rare.
Most people that get it have no symptoms, so you would never even know that you had it. So that's good. But if you do get some symptoms, likely there'll be some combination of fever, headache, body aches, joint pain, and mostly you'll recover no problem.
Dr. Brownstein spoke to ABC. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. And it's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's Dan Schwartzman. Dan.
Good morning, Karen. Aaron Judge continuing his American League home run record pace, bashing 2 more in the Bronx in a Yankees win.
Judge flies it deep left center field. Number 50 could be on its way, and it's gone. Goodbye. The captain. Half-century mark.
That's courtesy of WFAN in New York. Judge now with 51 homers on the season. That puts him on pace to hit 63 this year to break his own American League home run record of 62 set 2 years ago. Yankees a 10-3 win over the Colorado Rockies, moving a game and a half ahead of the Orioles for first place in the American League East as Baltimore gets doubled up by the Astros 6-3. Mets fall in San Diego 3-2 to the Padres. Jackson Merrill hitting a walk-off homer off of Edwin Diaz. The Braves, though, they also lose 5-1 to the Washington Nationals. That keeps the Mets 2.5 games behind the Braves for the final National League wildcard slot. Elsewhere, Red Sox lose their third in a row, 7-5 to the Diamondbacks. Giants fall to the Mariners 4-3. The A's knock off the Brewers 4-3, while the 40-man Shohei Ohtani does not add to his home runners steals total in a Dodgers 3-1 win over the Tampa Bay Rays. White Sox become the second fastest team in the modern era to lose 100 games in a season. They fall to the Tigers 9-4. Keegan Bradley winning the BMW Championship at Castle Pines in Colorado by 1 stroke over 3 others to win his 7th PGA Tour tournament. The recently named U.S. Ryder Cup captain finishing at 12 under to edge Sam Burns, Ludwig Aberg, and Adam Scott. Patriots starting quarterback Jacoby Brissett may have dodged a serious injury after leaving Sunday's preseason loss to the Commanders in the first quarter with a throwing shoulder injury. Pats head coach Gerard Mayo says they'll reassess Brissett later today, but he didn't believe the injury to be serious. Sad news, though, in the NFL. Longtime Ravens offensive line coach Joe DeLassandris passing away at the age of 70. DeLassandris had been hospitalized the past 2 weeks with what had been described as an acute illness. That's your Bloomberg Sports Update. I'm Dan Schwartzman. Karen.
All right, Dan, thank you. And Boston listeners, our new home beginning September 3rd is going to be 92.9 FM. That's a day after Labor Day. Bloomberg Radio moving to 92.9 FM in Boston.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. The Middle East on edge once again after what Israel is calling a preemptive strike on Hezbollah over the weekend, taking out thousands of missile launchers in southern Lebanon. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the U.S. is monitoring the situation.
We have been concerned about the conflict escalating into an all-out regional war since October 7th, and we have worked round the clock with partners and allies to avert that outcome.
And joining us now from Tel Aviv for the latest is Bloomberg News Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Bronner. Ethan, good morning. What is the level of concern now about a regional war?
Morning, Nathan. I think it's unchanged. I mean, it's a sort of a 10, 11 months of this has led to a kind of weird routine quality, which is that anytime there's a flare-up, there's a sense that it is going to spin out of control, and indeed it might, and so far it hasn't. There is a growing sense that maybe there's a kind of a choreographed containment underway that still could explode, but for the moment, both Hezbollah and Israel and Iran apparently have decided to keep it within a certain set of rules of engagement.
Does that coordinated containment apply to Iran? I mean, it's been nearly a month since the death of the Hamas leader in Tehran, and Iran has said it's going to retaliate and has not.
That's right. So it looks like it might. It looks like, through various diplomatic channels, Iran is sending the message that it is holding off to see whether these talks in Cairo for a ceasefire and a hostage release in Gaza get anywhere. I mean, I think that there are so many factors. It's kind of a Rubik's Cube, but I do think that Iran does not want Israel to retaliate against it if it were to retaliate against Israel. And the same is true for Hezbollah and for Israel. So there's both a lot of fear and a lot of sense that, well, let's see if we can get somewhere some other way. But the idea of a regional conflagration, don't forget there are U.S. Carrier and air defense that have been moved to the region. It is certainly not something that anyone seems to want at the moment.
How does the situation in northern Lebanon or in northern Israel between Israel and Hezbollah affect the talks, if at all, between Israel and Hamas that are underway in Cairo and Qatar?
So it affects them in the following way. The last 10 months of battle between Israel and Hezbollah have been inspired, if you like, by Israel's attack on Hamas in Gaza. So Hezbollah says we're doing this in solidarity with Hamas, and if there is a peace deal of some kind, a ceasefire, a hostage deal, we will stop. Now that won't end the threat from Israel's perspective of having Hezbollah right on its border, but it would have a big role in whether more diplomacy could occur. So there's definitely a big role there.
In our last 30 seconds then, Ethan, do you get a sense that there is tangible progress in the talks that are underway with Hamas kind of getting briefed and Israel meeting with international mediators?
That is the word from those involved. Tangible, but not necessarily massive. They're working out details. I think that, it's a longer conversation. We can have another time. But the question is whether the guy running Hamas really wants a deal or not. And at the moment, that's unclear. But there is ongoing progress, according to officials involved, yes.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.